with us, and I have the privilege of introducing them. So I'll start by introducing Anita Horner. Anita is a senior instructor and practice advancements manager at the Campy Center for the Prevention and Treatment of Child Abuse and Neglect at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in Denver. Additionally, since 2005, she has held the role of the manager of the National Center on Family Group Decision Making. Anita provides training, consultation, coaching, and technical assistance in family group decision making, or FGDM, program implementation and practice, to service providers in child welfare, youth justice, tribal communities, and others serving children and families both nationally and internationally, in locations including Ontario, British Columbia, New Brunswick, Bermuda, New Zealand, and Taiwan. Previously, Anita worked in child welfare in direct practice as a social caseworker, FGDM coordinator, and social casework supervisor. Anita uses she, her pronouns and identifies as a white-coded Native and is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and a daughter of the Muskogee Greek Nation. We also have with us today Mary Lee Sherry, who has been in private practice since 2010. She was employed by Brant Family and Children's Services in Brantford, Ontario from 1998 to 2019. Prior to becoming the FGC or FGDM coordinator and manager for the Family Group Decision Making team in 2005, she was a direct service child protection worker and manager, primarily in community-based settings. She is a FGC or FGDM trainer and mentor for new coordinators in Ontario, and has provided training for coordinators in New Brunswick, Taiwan, and the US. Her passion is transforming child welfare through the leadership of the children and their families who are receiving child welfare services, particularly through FGC and FGDM. She has been focused on embedding these values and principles in the child welfare system locally and provincially. And Mary Lee has her BA from St. Francis Xavier University in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, and her MSW from Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Ontario. Today we're also joined by Kyla Clark, who is the Strengthening Families Program Administrator for Utah's Child Welfare System. Kyla has worked in child welfare for 14 years and is responsible for the system's strengths and needs assessment. Kyla works closely with frontline staff and the training team to ensure that the current versions of the UFACET, the Utah Family and Child Engagement Tool, and the SDM, the Structured Decision Making, are accurately meeting the staff and families' needs. Kyla has been part of Utah's continued efforts to provide services to families so they can safely care for their own children and reduce the need for out-of-home placement. Kyla serves as a liaison between DCFS and the substance use treatment community and works on the statewide efforts to engage pregnant mothers with substance use disorder in treatment and support services as early in the pregnancy as possible. Kyla also works to improve the service array in the state of Utah. And when not at work, Kyla is a proud mother of 3 children and 2 fur babies. And joining our panel, we also have Danette Larsing, who is the Project Development Administrator at Utah's Child Welfare State Office. Danette is a leader in creating a teaming process to increase family leadership alongside the Campy Center. Family voice and involvement is a passion focus for Danette. Danette has worked for child welfare for 17 years in a variety of roles and brings a well-rounded view of the issues surrounding this complex work. Danette has her master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. Danette is also a foodie and accepts restaurant recommendations. We're very happy to have them with us this afternoon. And again, thank you to all of you for joining us in this session. And with that, I will turn the time over to Danette.
Thank you, Daniel. It's really good to see a lot of you. I recognize a lot of faces and names. I just wanted to let everybody know, I'm going to first start a poll so that we can get a sense of who is in the room, if you want to go ahead and answer that. But we have been working with Anita and Marilee. Their faces might be, you might recognize them. You might be part of the group that's been working with them. But we've been working with Anita and Marilee for the past almost 2 years to figure out ways that we can strengthen working with families and increase family leadership. And we've seen a lot of success. And with that, they've become very familiar with our system as well. So I'm really excited for you all to get more exposure to what we've been learning and have this experience. And if you guys have questions, feel free to put those into chat. We'll be monitoring those. And I'm not sure if you want to raise your hand, we can pause and you can unmute if you want to have some dialogue as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Anita.
Well, thank you all. I think we can go ahead and start with the next slide. And I also want to say hello to those of you I have not met and those I also have met. I'm grateful to have the chance to be working with all of you and look forward to our conversation today. So the purpose of our time together, as you can see on the slide, is to really look at how to improve family involvement and leadership in team meetings that you all have by increasing awareness of the power differential and also looking at strategies to increase family group leadership. We can go ahead to the next slide here. So I want to start with a definition, just to be really clear about what we're talking about when we talk about family or family group. The tendency is to look at family as being parents or parents and children, and that's it. The bottom line is that what we're talking about through this session today is that the family group may include blood and non-blood kinship relatives, maternal and paternal relatives, friends, religious leaders, community members, tribal elders, and natural supports. The family group collective decides who attends the meeting whenever there's a family group type meeting and or when we're talking about family decision making of any type, especially with the family action meeting process that is happening now through the the first impression project that is happening throughout the state of Utah. It's important to understand that when we're talking about the family group, that caseworkers, attorneys, and also not service providers determine who the family group identifies as their family, but does encourage the family to think broadly about who should attend the meeting. So it is the broader family group who determines that. And what I want to say about that is that we actually, the purpose behind having a family group is that when we talk about any sort of decisions or plans that that need to be made in order to keep children safe, to make sure that they're well taken care of, to make sure that well-informed decisions are being made, that it's helpful to consider the basic that those who are involved with the DCFS or child welfare system or any other system likely are in crisis, as we know. When they're in crisis, we know that their thinking may not necessarily be as clear, just like ours would not be as clear either. And we also know that when someone's in crisis and or is dealing with a problem, that they may have tried to figure out how to address that problem before ever becoming involved with the DCFS system. For whatever reason, they were not successful at addressing the problem. They've now, come into the DCFS system. And when we then, as either DCFS and or other service providers, attorneys, caseworkers, when any of us then ask those very same people who are caught up in that crisis, i.e. like the parents, the primary caregiver, possibly the children, depending on their ages, that kind of thing. What we do is we're asking the very people that are caught in the crisis to try to figure out how to address it. They've probably been trying to do that. So the idea behind family group, widening the family group, considering family to be more than just those who are involved in the crisis, is really about looking at who are the organic people involved in the children and parents or primary caregivers' lives, who may not be caught up in the crisis, who may be able to bring in perspectives along with their love and care and their knowledge of the family system, which is likely more than we'll ever know, and work to develop solid, well-informed plans for the care of the children and or how to support the parents in addressing whatever needs to be addressed. So I just want to put that out there about why when we talk about family, we always are talking about more than just parents and children. So next slide. On this slide, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be using your cell phones for this. So I'd like you all to pull up your cell phones and go to the website that you'll see listed here called Menti, MENTI.com. And go ahead, click on that. And when you get into menti.com, Danette, you can go ahead and stop sharing your screen and I'll share what's going to happen next. Okay, and so I'm going to share my screen. So again, when you go to menti.com, what will happen is that you will be able to see a code. When you get to menti.com, there is a code that you'll want to enter, and that code is 4327. It's up at the top of your screen, 4327-8677. So again, menti.com, and the code is 4327-8677. And hold on before you do anything once you've gotten that code in there. It should show that you'll have, something where you'll have a chance to actually be answering a question that we have up on the screen here in a minute. But before you answer that question, I'd like to just ask you to just kind of think for a minute about who you identify in your family, who you identify as your family. It could be your family of origin. It could be the family that you grew up with. It may or may not be the same as the family of origin. It may be that you've had several families that you've been connected to in your life for various reasons. It could be the family that you created yourself in your adult life. Whoever you see as family, I'd like you to think about your family. And as you think about your family, and you think about, the things that you've been through together, the good times, maybe the hard times and the challenges, the successes you've had, I'd also like you to think about what would your family need in a crisis? And as you think about that, what I'd like you to do is on that menti.com, once you get there, and put the code in, you should be able to actually then enter a word, one word, to describe what would your family need in crisis. And we're going to create a word cloud with your words. You're welcome to answer more than one time. There are 3 times that you can answer there. It gives you 3 chances. You can answer, if you've got 3 different words that you'd like to share, please feel free to put them in. If you want to just put in one word, but please just one word per answer. And we're going to give people a chance to do that. Just give a couple of minutes for everyone to do that. If you're not clear on the instructions, or if you can't get into menti.com, if you could please put something into chat, that would be very helpful. Not yet. Because that's the answer. Let me see everything. All right, as you can see on the screen, We have a great word cloud with so many people. It's awesome because we've got quite a dense word cloud, for lack of better words, really very full. And so what I'd like you to do is really look at some of the words that show up on this word cloud about things your family would need when they're in crisis. And as you look at the words, what I'd like to ask you to do is either in chat or by taking yourself off of mute. And to do so, what you do is down at the bottom of your screen, if you just move your mouse around, you'll see over on the left bottom, there's a mute button. Just click on that to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak up, and just share what it is that you notice about the words that are in this word cloud, about what people would need, their families would need in crisis. What do you notice? And I will, before I turn it over to see who has anything that they'd like to share as far as their observations, just point out, for most of us are familiar with word clouds, but if you're not, just that reminder that the words that are bigger, that you see in bigger font, mean that quite a few people have put those words, entered those words as their responses. So this gives you a sense of how many words are actually common about what the needs would be that you believe your family would have if they were in crisis. The smaller words also matter just as much. It just means that there are fewer people who may have entered those words. So just again, would like to open it up if anybody would like to share what it is that you notice as you see the words in this word cloud. If someone's monitoring chat, if you can let me know, because I can't see chat, if there may be anything in chat that we need to.
We've got some great things coming in chat, a lot about connections, patience, compassion, knowing what my options are, non-tangible things that are more emotional and supportive. Lots can be done by just being understanding of the situation. Emotional support versus physical need, supports and resources, non-judgmental, and feeling like someone else understands what they're going through.
Thank you, Kyla. And thank you to all of you who have entered things into chat. And it's also good to see some familiar names in chat as well. So good to hear from you all. And what I would say is that, yes, I think especially some of the comments about that the words do have more to do with emotional support rather than physical needs. If we think about what we tend to offer to families when they become involved with the system, it's not often the emotional stuff that is our focus, right? I mean, we're there to try to provide more tangible services, resources, supports, but it's important to just recognize that these other pieces, the compassion, the empathy, the support, the understanding, patience, non-judgmental, support, as Kyla mentioned, someone put in there. Friends, kindness, time. Some of those things, obviously, are not tangible, but are incredibly important. And so I just want to note that, and it doesn't take away from the fact that those services may serve a place as well. But I think our tendency is to throw services towards families without necessarily always recognizing that sometimes there's other things they may need in crisis in order to get their feet under them, in addition to the services, or maybe instead of, depending on the circumstances. And to recognize also that services do not equal safety. Now, that doesn't mean services are a bad thing. It just means always looking at when we're wanting to engage families and look at and bringing family members to the table, what is it that we're conveying through what we're willing to offer them? Go ahead, Marilee.
So What really strikes me as I look at this word cloud, and it is wonderful to have so many of you who contributed to it, that most of what is here is what a wider family circle gives a vulnerable person within their own
Right.
family system, however family is defined. When I worked for a system, I could have maybe done support and maybe a few other of these things, but it's all those people who love and care about them who are able to give them much of what they need. And so let's include the rest of that circle when we're involved, when the system is involved with people, when this is what we ourselves would need, the families we serve need most likely the very same things.
Exactly. I appreciate you sharing that because, again, it is about recognizing that sometimes, of course, we all know that sometimes with the families we serve, that they may have burned bridges with their loved ones, or may have really distanced themselves or withdrawn for whatever reason. And there are ways to really look at how can we widen that circle again to get people who are more organically involved with the parents and the children involved, so that there may be a chance of more successful resolution to the crisis situation. Lauren, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, my cat. So my question is, like, how do we help those family members repair those bridges with it? Like, how do we help our clients repair the bridges with their family members? That's a better way to say it. Like you talked about widening that circle. How do we do that? Because I know I have people on my caseload, and I know other people probably do too, that they tell me they do not have any informal support. So I'm just curious to know how to best help start that process.
So I think there's lots of various ways that can happen, but I think it's really looking at especially if you've got parents or maybe who are estranged, or primary caregivers who are estranged from their family group. And again, whether that family group is blood relatives, or whether it's others that are not blood related, but love and care for them and for their children. Often when you start talking about who loves and cares for your children, they will look at and consider listing people that they might not list for themselves. And that sometimes can be a good opportunity to start looking at, might it be good to have those people come to a meeting where they could help in planning with you for the children's, especially their immediate safety concerns, but also long-term, if there's a need for that. And often if it's about, the other way that I would often do it is I would ask, and if a parent was saying, well, I haven't talked to my sister for 5 years, and I say, well, can you share a little bit more about what that's about? Well, she borrowed $50 from me and she never returned it. Okay, well, does your sister have your children's best interest in mind? Does your sister love your children? Would it be possible to put that difference about the money, check that at the door? You guys can try to deal with that at another point, but would your sister be someone who would want to come and have a chance to work with you and others in the family group to come up with some sort of plan to address whatever needs to be addressed? And you'd be surprised how many people will, when they start to recognize that, okay, wait, this is about the chance for us to be able to create something together. And we know these children, because it's often around what are the needs of the children and how can those needs be met while the family is involved with the system, that what tends to happen is that people are able to say, okay, you know what, I'll check that. I'll figure that out. Now, what I want to be very clear about, and I also want to watch time here, but I want to be very clear, that does not mean that these meetings are family therapy meetings, and it doesn't mean that family therapy happens before you bring people together. But what does help is if you, if there's opportunity to talk with family members and before a meeting ever happens, and look at what might it take for those family members to come together in order to work together for a plan that hopefully will last long after the child welfare system has been able to exit the family's lives. Thank you for that. Marilee?
Yeah, and just to add a last piece, thank you, Anita. I mean, this is always a big worry, Lauren. And once you start learning kind of some of the questions to ask, it's almost like the worry disappears. But it's also, once the children are old enough to know who loves and cares about them, to ask them who loves and cares about you.
Yes.
And you might get some very surprising answers.
And that goes, and what Marilee's alluding to, just quickly, also has to do with the fact that, at least with the FAM meetings, the family action meetings that are now happening in some regions in Utah and will be rolling out in other regions within the next several months to years. What's happening with those is that it's not the parents or the primary caregiver who determines who attends the meeting. If the children are not with the parents or you know, in a situation where the parents are not available, the meeting can still happen with whoever the family group is, whoever we've known about and people have been able to contact, and they'll often tell us about other people who can join as well. We certainly want the parents and the caregivers there, primary caregivers there. Their voices are important. We want them there. And if they are involved, the parents are there and the parents don't want to go forward with a meeting with the fam, we don't have one. So please understand there's some criteria around that. But just to emphasize that generally when we start talking about meetings that involve family and not just parent meetings, we're talking about family meetings. Then we look at how do we widen that circle so that more people can be there who love and care for these children. I think we're gonna.
Yeah, and so I think, Danette, we can, oh, you'll need
I'll
to stop sharing.
Thank you all for participating in the word cloud.
Yeah. So I'm just going to get to the next slide here. So for child and family team meetings, which I know is the focus of this particular workshop, the same principle applies. How to include and invite the wider family group so that there are more family members in a child and family team meeting than there are service providers, because that then addresses the power differential. So I challenge you to that. And I know it's not always easy, but if you want all those things that were in that word cloud surrounding the parent-child group who you're serving, it means inviting that wider family group and them having a meaningful role. So Danette, if I could ask you to put the slide up with the continuum, thank you. So we're going to spend a little bit of time with this continuum, which, as you see, it's about decisions being made within when families are and children are involved with the child welfare, or DCFS for you in your system. So you'll see over on the far right in the red section, this is where the system primarily has the voice and the decision-making power over what's going to happen. Over on the far left, you'll see the other end of the continuum is where the family voice, and by family, remember, we mean that extended family group that Anita talked about in an earlier slide, as many people as we can possibly find. The largest number I ever found was 59 family members. So, and decisions that then that family group is primarily leading the decision making. And we have everything else in between. Now, this continuum is not meant to be judgmental. It's not meant to say the decisions all need to be in one place and not another. What I learned during my time in working in child welfare is that we need all of these. We need all of them. If you get a call in February that an 18-month-old is running around on a busy street and only a diaper, no adult around, you can't wait. You need to act. You can't say, well, wait, we're going to call the family group together before we do something. So we need all of these ways of making decisions. The challenge for all of us is that we work in a system that's built to be in the red, for the system to make the decisions. Not only DCFS, but also the court, because those two go hand in hand when families become involved with child welfare. The system is built to be in the red. And so the system I worked in, the vast majority of our meetings was in that red zone. Perhaps the orange, which is right next door, families are present where decisions are made, but you can see they have no input or say. Occasionally, there would be meetings in the system I worked in where families had a genuine voice at meetings. Their ideas and perspectives were listened to, but the decision-making rested with the service providers. The blue, where family members are present and partner with the system so that decisions are consensual. We had some of those. And in all honesty, the only thing that I know that's in the purple zone is family group conferencing or family group decision-making, where family groups truly assume as much leadership as they possibly can in making decisions. So we have this whole range of ways of making decisions, which really is about power, because decision-making is inevitably linked to power. And so how do we navigate that power when we want to widen out and include the wider family group? Are they coming to just simply listen and have nothing to say? Well, they're not likely to come again. I wouldn't as a family member. Or do they have a meaningful participation in shaping the decisions and moving forward? I would be more likely to participate in something like that. So could I ask you just to think about and maybe put into chat, or if someone wants to unmute, can you think of some examples of meetings that you have? And I include meetings that happen at court, meetings perhaps between attorneys trying to come to resolution, anyone who's involved with a family who is involved with DCFS. Just to think about what are some of the examples of meetings that you do and where do you think they are? Or maybe what I'll ask is, where do you think child and family team meetings fit on this continuum in your experience? Let me ask that question. Are families present at them? So remember, when we're saying families, it's that wider group. It's not mom and grandma. Are they present? How much say do they have? And who makes the decisions?
Are children present? Youth?
Yeah. Where do you think child and family team meetings right now, and there's no judgment about this, I can tell you where they would fit in the system I worked with before I retired. In the green, yeah, yellow, pattern toward green, yellow, green. Thank you for your honesty. Yellow or green, yeah. Yeah, seeing lots, depends on who the parents invite. Yeah, that certainly makes a difference. How much say do they actually have, even when they invite others, is another question.
I
Yeah.
say
Yeah,
So
Sure.
as an attorney, I don't attend that many family team meetings, but one thing that strikes me most of the time that I attend them is that the agenda is set by the caseworker, which is appropriate. And that the caseworker basically goes over the progress on the plan. And so the whole thing is sort of like an accountability meeting rather than a strategizing meeting. That's my typical experience. Every once in a while, I see a different kind of a meeting where it's opened up to, hey, where do you want, what can we do for you? Or what's going on from your perspective? And I think those meetings may be more productive and feel like more of a buy-in from the parents. But honestly, sometimes if the caseworker wasn't running the meeting, the parents just wouldn't say much. and so I'm not sure how to change that dynamic so that it's more of a buy-in. But that's one thing I've noticed that sort of bothered me. And then when we go to court, and I haven't been to the family team meeting, I'm often surprised that the texts that I'm getting from the caseworkers during the hearings are things like, well, in the family team meeting, they said they were going to do this and this and this, or blah, blah, blah. And here we are 3 weeks later, and they haven't done anything. And so I wonder, was there really buy-in in the family team meeting? And I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that observation.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Sid. And I've certainly been to many meetings like that too. We're actually going to shift gears here a little bit because it feels like the time to do that. I'm actually going to share some personal stories of times when I've been involved with systems, and invite you to plot them on the continuum. What was my experience? Where would I say, as a recipient of service, where would I say that my experience, where did my experience fit? And so I'm going to read these, and you'll see me looking off screen so that I can do that. And then I'll ask you to put in chat which box you think my story fits in. And then Danette will click the next and show you which one I felt it fit in. Because this illustrates, I think, Sid, exactly what you're getting at. What is this experience like for those who participate? So the first story I'll share with you is about the school system. So for one of my children in the school system, we wanted to be involved in creating a positive school experience for him. He was struggling, but there was no space for us. We were never invited to a meeting to problem solve and make decisions about how best to support the vulnerable one. Instead, we would receive suspension notices, which occasionally led to me filing an appeal. I felt like I was bothering them, the school staff, and so didn't even think about asking for a family meeting with them. So where does that fit on the continuum? Where does this experience fit on that continuum? And you can put your responses into chat. Yeah, red, totally red. And notice what it did for me. It made me want to file appeals and fight. And what did that resolve? Absolutely nothing, except maybe the suspension got reduced or removed, but nothing got resolved. So yes, absolutely red. So Danette, could you move to the next one? So this is a story about mental health services. A vulnerable family member wanted us to be part of a meeting with the mental health service provider. And so 4 of us attended, tried to ask questions and offer ideas about what usually helped the vulnerable one, but were not listened to. The service provider informed us about the plan for the vulnerable one. I now realize that the service provider assumed the meeting would be with the vulnerable one and 1 family member, rather than with several family members. During this crisis in my own family, I knew we needed to come together to talk, to sort things out for ourselves, and to find a way to support the vulnerable one. But being in crisis, we didn't have the ability to do this, even with 2 social workers within my family. There was no opportunity for us to gather together to do this during the period of the vulnerable one receiving mental health services. A significant chance for us to work together as a team was lost and has never been recovered. So where does this experience fit on the continuum for my family? Yeah, I see many of you saying yellow, yellow, red. Yeah, we were present, but had absolutely no voice, not even any interest in our voice. And yet that service provider could check, had a family meeting. Didn't feel like a family meeting to us. In fact, going forward, the rest of the family didn't attend those meetings. So thank you. Danette, could you put the next one up, please? So this next one, I'm going to ask you to think about. This is a story when my neighbor invited me to attend a medical case conference with her. So I'm going to ask you to think as you listen to this about where would my neighbor put herself on this continuum and what was my experience of participating in this meeting. So we're going to ask you to think about those 2, my neighbor's experience and my experience. So a neighbor asked me to attend a medical case conference with her to help support her voice in making decisions for her husband. We talked ahead of time about what she wanted to accomplish in the meeting and why she didn't want to go to that meeting alone. During the meeting, the focus was entirely on my neighbor, even though she was feeling overwhelmed and worried about the whole situation. My neighbor was offered various choices, and she expressed clearly what she felt her husband needed. The decisions made that day by the service providers took into account what she thought would be best for him. I, however, was completely ignored throughout the entire meeting. So I'd like to ask you where this experience fits for my neighbor on the continuum. We'll start there, and if you could put that into chat. Yeah, so I see many of you saying green, green, yellow. Yeah, and I would say that was her experience. Now let's shift to me. What was my experience of that meeting? Where would I put myself on that continuum? Yellow, red, yeah. I felt like I was part of the furniture, honestly. Even though I knew she was overwhelmed, they didn't know what to do with me. They were all very kind and helpful. And it probably meant something to my neighbor that I was there, but I was completely ignored. Yeah.
Lacey, you have a question?
I'm so sorry.
No.
I'm just wondering if it was the doctors weren't considering Mary Lee as part of the family group, and so they didn't care about her input, or?
I really don't know, Lacey. And actually, there was not one doctor in that medical case conference. They were all various support services. I think they didn't know what to do with me. They were used to only meeting with the primary person, who was my neighbor, who was the spouse. And they just, yeah, they didn't know what to do with another person.
So then they had her bring her own support people and didn't want to hear what her support people thought would be helpful?
I don't think they asked her to bring support people. She knew she needed a support.
Okay.
So she asked me to come, but then they didn't know what to do with me. And as honestly as I reflect back on my practice in child welfare, I would often show up at somebody's house and a neighbor or a friend or a family member would be there with the parent I was there to meet with. I mostly focused on the parent. When I think back, I'm not proud of that, but yeah. So they didn't know what to do with me. I hope that answers your question, Lacey. Okay, Danette, if you could, yeah. So this one is as a family meeting for my mom. They were held every 3 months. She was in long-term care. So my sister and I attended a family meeting with the social worker in my mom's long-term care setting every 3 months. Mom had consented for the two of us to be given her health information. During the family meeting, all the information flowed in one direction, from the social worker to us. We were invited to ask questions about the health information that was given to us during the meeting. We were not, however, invited to offer suggestions or ask questions about how to improve her quality of life, even when we had talked with Mom beforehand. When we did offer suggestions, we were mostly ignored. Mom was not present during these meetings. And they called them family meetings. So again, I'm going to ask you to think about where this experience fits on the continuum for my sister and me. And then later I'll ask where it fit for my mom. So where does this experience fit for my sister and me? Yeah, very much in the yellow. Very, very much. They were probably among the most frustrating meetings I've ever attended. And where did it fit for my mother? Where does this experience fit for her? Totally red. Often she didn't even know these meetings were happening until one of us told her. As far as I know, they did never consult with her before they met with us. And yet they could check the box. We've had a family meeting every 3 months. So Danette, may I ask you to go to the next one, please? So this is a meeting to look at in-home supports for an elderly friend. So an elderly friend asked that I be present when he met with a medical service provider who was going to assess his need for in-home medical supports, as well as his ability to live independently. During that meeting, we were both included and listened to. My friend was offered various choices about the services available to him, and with my support, he determined which ones would work best for him at that point in time. So where does this experience fit on the continuum for both my elderly friend and I? Yeah. Blue is what it felt like to me. And I have to tell you, it's the first time I ever had a meeting as a service recipient that ever felt like it was in the blue. And I'm sure we all can reflect on our own personal interactions with various systems. And where would we put our experience as service recipients? And so we share this with you to help you think about, even though our intentions are often good, what really does this feel like for those who are attending? How much say do they really have? How included are they? And the stories I've all told you, the biggest group was 4 family members. So we're going to shift over to Kyla, who has some things for you to think about.
Yeah, so I kind of went through some great scenarios, and we appreciate Marilee sharing kind of her own personal experiences. Everybody in this group has been in a team meeting. Some of you guys probably had one last night or earlier this week. So thinking about the last few that you've been at, who do you think really, who did the family see as having the power in that room? Who was actually driving that bus from the family's perspective? So I'm going to launch a poll for you guys to answer that. This is only a single choice. So thinking of who had the most power in the room at that last team meeting, who do you think the family saw as being in charge or having that decision-making power? I love that that's such a big group. The numbers are so dynamic. It's exciting to watch. And if you're like, I've never been in a team meeting, we should talk, because that's a whole different level of system problem. So we should talk after this. All right, we got about 60% of you guys answering the poll. We'll give it just another few seconds here. All right, I think no, we're getting a few more. All right, we're gonna go ahead and end the poll here in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I'm gonna share the results with you. So with about 131 of you responding, most of us are saying that it's DCFS. We see some where it feels like the attorneys. I do think sometimes the attorneys in the team meeting, especially if it's a room full of DCFS and legal partners and maybe 1 or 2 family members, that definitely is going to feel like the control belongs elsewhere. I'm glad we've moved away from blaming judges. Sometimes that has been a trend back in the day. The judge was driving everything, and well, we have to do it because the judge said. So I'm glad to see that number is down. But I'm also really sad to see how few times we believe that it's actually the parent or the family themselves having any of that power. And Marilee and Anita are going to do a great job kind of talking about some of the ways that we can work on that power differential. And I'm sorry if the poll didn't come up for some people. You can always throw your thoughts in the chat if the polls aren't working for you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your honest responses. So Danette, if we could ask you just to put up the next slide. So this is where we get to do a little bit of reflection as service providers. You heard some of the stories that I heard and what made a difference to me or what prevented me from feeling like I was able to participate or my family was able to participate. So we'd like to ask you to really do some soul searching and put into chat, what are the ways that we hinder the family group's participation? Perhaps unintentionally, I think a lot of the times it is, but we do. Yeah, so if you could just put some things into chat. Thank you, Chrissy, how are you? Meeting's not theirs. That's a profound point. Feeling rushed, not allowing silence. We tell them what to do. Yeah. Don't give them enough time to think. Don't notify them of non-negotiables. Yeah. Don't even invite the parents. Wow. Many families don't want us there. I'm not sure I'd want you there either. Checking boxes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we set the outline and then they need to fit the box, right? Much like happened in that story with my neighbor. Yeah. So Danette, could I ask you to put some of the, yeah. So some of you have already mentioned this, but here are some of our thoughts additionally to yours. Predetermined plan, I think somebody said that. Really, you're trying to get them to agree to what's already been decided. So how much say do they really have? And I did that a lot as a caseworker, not sharing the full information so that they can make well-informed decisions and plans. Being mindful of the words we use, and you'll hear us talk a lot about this as we attend training together. And some of that, and we're talking about them as if they're not in the room, using their role rather than names. Mom, what do you think? Dad, what do you think? Grandma, rather than using their names, the names of the children. How many service providers are in these meetings? What's the ratio between service providers and family members? And when there are more service providers than family members, you can be guaranteed the family's voice is going to be overpowered. And really, I often think one service provider equals 3 family members in terms of power. Danette, if you could, yeah. Not including the child or youth, how often that happened in my own practice. I look back and I shudder. This is about them. How do they have say over their own lives? Bias or judgment about the family, that starts to sneak in there sometimes. Trying to push people into doing things. Got this great service for you, go to it. How many times did this happen in my own practice? Go to a parenting program. So they'd go and I say, well, now you need to go do something else. When really it wasn't addressing the issue at all.
Can I make another comment?
Sure.
One of the things that keeps going through my brain, it gelled a little bit when you said that we've moved away from the judge's fault, but the truth is there's an order of the court underlying all this. And the order of the court usually specifies certain steps that the family needs to go through. And regardless of what the creative ideas are that they might want to come up with, they still have to be within the parameters that the court has set in the family plan. And so I think there is always going to be some kind of tension, because the truth is a lot of people just don't want to complete everything, or they don't want to follow through with what the order is. And I don't know what to do about that. And so no matter how creative they are and how many supports they have, we still have that court order that we're supposed to be following so that we can monitor parental change.
Yeah. So what I would suggest is, rather than the court order coming first and people being expected to follow it, gather the family group together to decide what needs to happen so that things are different, and use that as the basis of the court order. People who have say in what they think is going to work for them, when they have that say, they're much more likely to follow it and see it as helpful and beneficial. And again, with the wider family there, they often know, and they're the supports who will help the parents make whatever changes they need to make. And I think you will see a difference, a dramatic difference actually, in the follow through in the court orders if it's done in that other order. If the family group determines what is needed, and then the court order makes that kind of official, if you will.
And it's important to understand too, that in order for the family group to really address really solidly what is needed, they need to have full information about what the concerns that DCFS has are, so that they can make well-informed decisions and plans. And 95% of the time, families will do that. They just need that information, and then they can work to try to address it to the satisfaction of DCFS and the court. So that's an
Yeah.
important piece.
And it may mean the court just needs to catch its breath for a minute so that the family group can come together and determine what's going to work best in their situation. In my jurisdiction, the court hearings could be on pause, or there could be a temporary order until the wider family group came together, and then the order changed based on what the wider family group determined together. So I think we should probably move to the next slide. I think that's yours, Anita.
Yeah. So we obviously just talked about ways that we as systems may hinder family groups participation. We're now going to talk about how service providers, i.e. all of us, most likely, all of us who are being paid to work with families in some shape or form as far as our particular schools of discipline. And so what I'd like you to do is to think about what are some ways that service providers are helping family group participation. What are some of the things that you all are doing or that you've watched some of your colleagues or those in other professions who are working with the families doing to help with helping with family group participation? So, yep, see Kyla's comment about, so if you'll please put some things into chat around that, that would be great. Identifying providers available to help families, letting them decide which ones they want to have help them. Ask if there's anything they need. What would they like? Yes, absolutely. Ask family what's going well. Let's see. When I meet with a family and they cannot think of any social supports, I ask them, who would they call in times of need? Absolutely. Ensuring they have access to what they need. Make sure key members are being identified by family members, putting it in the family's hands. Yeah, so really making sure that we're looking at who, is this the family's meeting or is this our meeting? Whose needs are we trying to meet here? And how do we go about making that happen? And referring back to the continuum that we spent a bunch of time with, what you'll notice is that right side of the continuum, and we don't need to pull it back up because I think most of you are familiar with the continuum to some extent, and I believe it's been made available through handouts or could be if need be. But what I want to go back and ask you to think about for a moment is that on that red side, the right side of the continuum, it's primarily about the system's needs being met. Even though the hope is that the family's needs will be met too, it is primarily system driven for system needs to be met. Various, requirements that we have or, those kinds of things that we need to do. Whereas over to the left of the continuum, it's more about the family group's needs being met as the primary focus. So I see here we've got start connecting with all family and friends right away to come up with a plan for safety and how we can quickly mitigate that and get kids home. Absolutely, sounds like somebody, and I know who this is, feels pretty strongly about that and has been involved in some of the conversations that we've all been having with the family, the first impressions work through FAM. I think in general, it's just really important for us to recognize that, again, ownership, and ownership, I mean that in a positive way, not, well, they need to take responsibility. Well, yeah, of course, but it's also about, do they feel like this really belongs to them? And I'd ask you to think too, going back to your own experiences with maybe medical appointments. And if you're told you have to do something rather than given some options, and having a say-so in the matter, what feels more like something you're going to follow through with? And that's true with families as well. So Jeanette, if you could put up a bit of a list here. Yeah, so some of the things we came up with are going to be similar to what you came up with. Maybe we've got some additional ones that will be different. So providing full information, again, that's part of the power. Recognizing families' power is that they have information about themselves that they don't always necessarily need to share with us, but they need to use that information along with the information that the system has in order to develop a well-informed plan, often for the safety of the children children and or to support the primary caregivers and or parents to address whatever the issues are and hopefully be able to resolve those things. Making space for the family to ask questions until they fully understand. And making sure that they understand that it's okay to ask questions, that we're not going to judge them about, well, if you don't know this, then gee, we're not so sure that we want to work with you or that we think you can handle making decisions, okay? Privacy for the family to discuss things without service providers. We don't need to know all of their business. What we need to know is that they're using and they're having full conversations amongst themselves about things that they might not feel comfortable talking about with us present. That if they're able to talk about those things that they might not say in front of us, that's good, because we want to make sure that whatever plans they're coming up with, that they're considering all of the information and all of what they know in order to make the best and most safe plan for the children. Providing facts about the situation, not opinions. We should not be giving opinions. We should be providing the factual information so that the family group then takes that information that we've just shared with them and they form their own opinions and then sort out how they want to address the issues. Next, Jeanette, please. Truth wrapped in compassion. You're going to hear that a lot from Marilee and myself, because it is always about being as truthful and as clear as we possibly can. Because again, when we're not clear, the family group's not clear, and it makes it harder for them to make really solid, clear, effective plans. And doing so with compassion, to think about what would we need if we were in crisis. Go back to that word cloud. Asking people how they would like to be addressed. We should be using people's names rather than saying, well, Mom, how do you feel about this? She's not my mother, okay? And so it is about treating them as individuals and recognizing them as people with their names. Asking the family what they would like to discuss during the meeting, during the CFTM. And again, recognizing that if you want them to actively participate, it's about, do they have a vested interest other than just coming in and reviewing whatever the system wants to review, and that's the end of the meeting. What about, are there other things that the family group may want to discuss? And do they feel like they can bring things up in the meeting? Is there space for that? Are the meetings rushed and or, well, we've got 2 minutes left. Do you have anything you want to say? Okay. Being open to the family making decisions and plans as long as they address the concerns. And I think families are willing to do that. If they're already, if the family is court involved and there's already very clear parameters about what the court has ordered, make sure the family understands what those parameters are. When they understand those parameters, they're most often willing to work with those parameters and honor those parameters. But we've got to be clear and make sure that they understand what they are in order to make well-informed plans. Next slide, please. And then there's more here. So additional ways that service providers are helping family group participation. Making efforts to locate and invite wider circle into the meeting. And to be honest, I think it's important that everybody recognize if you have an interaction with that family, whether you are the caseworker, the casework supervisor, the guardian ad litem, the parent's attorney, whoever you are, the therapist, if you hear anything that gives you a sense about somebody who might be important or might be someone that the family sees as a part of their family, being able to note that is really very helpful, because what it does is it helps again with widening that circle and asking more about who that person might be and how they're connected and what they and being able to get their contact information could be incredibly helpful. So that should not just fall on the caseworker. That's also something that the coordinators, the family action meeting coordinators and others should be helping with as well, is to widen that circle. But in my opinion, reasonable efforts mean that all of us are constantly doing that throughout the life of the family's involvement. There's no such thing as, oh, well, we've hit the maximum limit of who we want to have as on our in our safe system as far as who the family members are. Okay, and I'm seeing Tara say, I want to put a plug into including foster parents. If the children are in care, they can become long-term informal support sometimes. Absolutely. And I would say the same thing about you know, teachers and coaches and those as well. So thank you for that, Tara. More family members than service providers, as Marilee was saying. If we're looking at, do you really want this to be a meeting that the family group feels is theirs? Then the way to do that is to always have significantly more family members than service providers. That really helps them to feel like it's their meeting. And it helps them to feel like maybe there's actually a vested interest in having a say-so, that maybe they'll be heard. They know the system still has the power, the ultimate power. They know that between DCFS and the court, that they will have the final say, not the family group. But it's still helpful to have as many family group members as possible. And then following through with the CFTM plan that you agreed to. Let me just point out something around follow through. What I can tell you is that a few years ago, I did some research into who does good follow up or follow through around the US, around North America, and actually ended up expanding it to around the world. And to be honest with you, there's very little out there in any field, any discipline, any area where there's good follow-up or follow-through after a plan has been developed. And so I think we've got some things we've got to really look at how we're going to do different. And so those things are, when a plan is created, then how is DCFS, how is the court, and how are the family members going to follow through? And the bottom line is, when we look at what we're hearing from various states about who's more likely to follow through or less likely to follow through, it's often the system that is less likely to follow through with the plan. Now, there's probably lots of reasons for that that we could get into, but that does not take us off the hook. So it comes back to, what are we going to do to make sure that if that family plan that has been created is a plan that effectively and sufficiently addresses the concerns that DCFS and or the court has, then what are we going to do to make sure that that plan is being actively implemented, and that that plan is also kept relevant, current, and achievable? So just want to make sure that's clear. And then if an issue needs to be addressed, bringing the wider family group back together, that's what you do with follow-up. If the plan is not working, which often first-time plans, I'd like you to think about your own worlds, your own lives, personally and professionally. How often do first plans go off without a hitch? Not always. And so it's about recognizing that's going to be true for families as well, and that we need to make sure the communication is happening well enough amongst us, between families and service providers, so that if the plan is not working, that here's the time for them to all come back together so that the plan can be revised and address whatever wasn't working and keep it going. Again, you want to keep that plan relevant, current, and achievable throughout the life of the case. We do that with treatment plans without thinking twice about making any sort of revisions to those treatment plans without checking with anybody. We take freedom as DCFS and or as courts to make any sort of changes. Family groups have the right to that too. And including the family in decision making, all decisions about their family, they have a right to be involved in those decisions. And so I think it's important to look at that. One legislation piece that I'll just put out is the Fostering Connections legislation from 2008. That may or may not, now I by no means am a legal mind here, so I want to be very clear that I understand that everybody interprets legislation differently, but I just want to make you aware of that legislation, because it may be something to just revisit and to look at how does it apply with what we're discussing here today. I think, Danette, we can go on to the next slide. Inclusion creates safety. Separation or keeping people excluded does not create safety for children. The more eyes you can have on children, the better. And the family group has more eyes than we do that are going to see that child.
Thanks, Anita. So I mentioned early in our session together that we've been working with Marilee and Anita for close to 2 years now, trying to implement some of these strategies. And really we focused on a lot of things, but in the premise of inclusion, creating safety, we really wanted to make sure we were really deliberate about widening the circle and having a strong emphasis on that we wanted to make sure our team composition. So when we've been talking about those ratios, what we started to learn was even just being in the room as a service provider sort of narrows families' ability to do some planning, even if we don't speak. And I think it was Marilee who mentioned sometimes one service provider is the equivalent of 3 family members, or it can feel that like that. So we really wanted to make sure that we were being mindful of how many service providers were in the room, because we wanted to make sure family members, that wider circle, was actually represented more than any of the service providers. The other thing that we've been working on as we've doing this work together is providing full information to the family. And part of that, the subsets of that, is what are the facts without bias, without judgment, and including how does that impact the child's safety. So when we're sharing information, those are the things that we're really focused on. And in our efforts to do so, we're tracking this pretty closely, because we want to be successful. We also want to be able to share what those successes are. And what we have found is 73, when we put our efforts here, it's almost a 3-to-1 ratio that we're getting family members to the table. So 73% of the composition of those team meetings are the wider circle, and 27% are the service providers. And I can say my time as a caseworker or even a supervisor, I didn't hit these benchmarks. So this is really exciting to me, that if we do really focus on these strategies, we can make that work. We also have surveys that go out to families if they've participated in this type of meeting. So I wanted to throw in some things that we're hearing directly from the families we serve. One person wrote back, "I thought this was a great way for the caseworker to see beyond the child and their primary caregivers." So really feeling like they're being seen in that broader context. "I think it gives the caseworkers a broader understanding of the family dynamic and the background. Lots of great ideas, and we came up with the best plan possible for the child's success." And inherently, I think within that comment is they also feel invested in the plan that they came up with and are more likely to follow through. And I think that, Sid, speaks to some of the things that you were mentioning around, sometimes families have a hard time following through when they're told to do something. And these subtle strategies, which are not easy, it sounds so simple, but it does take a lot of practice and a lot of work. But when you get the hang of it, there's really good success that happens. I'll turn it back over to you, Anita.
All right. So as you look at this continuum again, and I'm aware that there may be others who didn't get the chance to see it earlier, because I know there were some people that joined us after the session began. Where would you like to see CFTM move to on the continuum in your jurisdiction? And what I want to be very clear about is that CFTM is, as it's designed right now, would not go in the purple because of the fact that there's no private family time, there's no preparation, that kind of thing. So it would have to change to family group conferencing in order to be in that purple. It doesn't mean you can't vote for purple, but I just want to make that very clear.
Yeah, and earlier I think you all said you felt it's currently kind of between the green and the yellow.
That's right.
So where would you like it to go?
And what I would like to also recognize, as you're, and some of you are seeing that there are 2 questions in this poll, actually. So we're going to ask you to look at both of those questions. So this, if you scroll down, if you're not seeing the second question in the poll, you should see a darker gray vertical bar on the right side. If you scroll down, you'll see the second question that asks, what are you committed to doing differently on the next CFTM you attend to support the family group's leadership? And hopefully it gives you the opportunity to answer that. So we'll just give another minute or two for people to answer the poll, because I recognize we're asking two questions here, and one that includes open-ended answer. We've heard from roughly half of the group, so we're just going to give a bit more time for people to respond. We've heard from roughly 65% of the audience, so we're still going to give just a little bit longer for people to respond. I want to give people a chance to really answer, especially that second question, because I know it would take me a little time to think that through if I were responding.
You just let me know when you're ready for me to end the poll and I'll broadcast the result.
Thanks, Kyla. It looks like we're about 70%, so we'll just give it maybe another minute. Okay, Kyla, I think you could go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So as you see, do you want to do this, Peter? Okay. So as you can see with this, the first question is, where would you like to see CFTM move to on the continuum in your jurisdiction? It looks like the majority, 56%, said they'd like to see it go to the blue. And that was followed by the purple, which would mean shifting it to family group conferencing, which would be maybe something that Utah would like to do at some point. I know Utah actually, for some of you longtime people, was doing a form of family group conferencing back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But since then, what's been practiced has not really been that FGC, so would need to get back to that. And then Green, it got third place with 10%. So again, that's from it having recently been more the green to yellow is where you all plotted it when we asked that question earlier. And so in the second question, unfortunately, I can't see what answers people submitted. I don't know if anybody else is able to see those in order to share those. If so, I'll be quiet and give a chance for there to be some sharing of what was listed in the second response.
Unfortunately, it's giving me an error when I hit details, but I'm going to keep trying to get around my error, and I'll let you know if I get there.
Thank you. In the meantime, if people want to quickly put some of those things into chat, you're most welcome to do so. I see one, no changing the goalpost. That's an excellent thing. We should not be asking, the family group needs to know what they need to do right up front. And they need to be able to know it, understand what to do and how to get there so that they can do it. If they're seeing a different picture in their head from what you're describing, then that means you guys are not on the same page and they don't quite know where they need to arrive to as far as what that goalpost is. So it's always important to do. And identify, invite, involve, love that. More individuals to be involved, teachers, doctors, other family members, friends. Yep, definitely always more family. Teachers and doctors are great, but those count as service providers. So unless they're personally related or connected to the family, it's a personal relationship, not professional, then yeah. Having them take the lead in meetings using their voices. Absolutely. And in order to do that, it means helping them to feel comfortable with how do they do that? Some families might do that very easily. Others, it might not be the way that they normally would do things. And so what would they need in order to be able to get there? How do we help them with that to make it more comfortable for them? Okay. Yeah, I'm aware. Okay, so I want to just close, Danette and or Kyla, and I want to say thank you to all of you for your participation and your responsiveness during this session. Danette, Kyla, do you have anything, or are you good to go?
Yeah, I wasn't able to find them. If we do find them, I can send them out and share, but I just appreciate all of you. And I know that this was a lot of information. You will be hearing out from us more so we can ask questions, but Kyle and I are available to you if you're thinking of anything or if you have questions, we'd be glad to support you in your efforts to increase family leadership.
Yeah, and just to back up Danette, I know a lot of times we come to these, they're really theoretical. It's a lot of great ideas, but when it comes down to like nitty gritty or putting it into practice, like definitely reach out to Danette and I. We're here to help kind of problem solve and help us take these steps forward on increasing family leadership. Thanks.